I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor.
Very, very rocky.
Death by government.
Drain the swamp.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of Swamponomics TV. I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor. Today, Bidenomics, politics, and labor. The country has been engulfed in labor strife. Though nobody really noticed, Hollywood writers and actors were on strike for more than 100 days. Union workers at Hormel Foods, the maker of Spam, could soon hit the picket lines. The Culinary Workers Union, an organization representing tens of thousands of hospitality workers in Las Vegas, voted to strike. And then there is the United Auto Workers, a union representing about 150,000 employees of the Big Three: Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. And all this is happening under the self-described most pro-union president in American history. So, what does this mean for US politics today, especially as the nation gears up for the election season? Joining us today is the royalty of Liberty Nation, Miss Lisa Donner. Although she is royalty, Miss Donner originates from Steeltown in Pittsburgh. Welcome to the program, Miss Donner.
I do. Thank you so much, Andrew. Good to be here with you.
So, you recently penned a terrific article titled "Political Pandering for the Union Vote Kicks into High Gear." In the piece, you write, quote, "Like peanut butter and jelly, labor unions and the Democratic Party have historically gone hand in hand. However, of late, the union vote has been up for grabs." Also, I believe you wrote this before President Biden announced he would accept UAW President Shawn Fain's invitation to attend a picket line. Some say this is a sign Biden fears Trump courting auto workers and potentially losing some votes next year. But in your view, should the incumbent be concerned that he will lose votes to the real estate billionaire mogul?
Absolutely. Look, saying something over and over does not make it true. Joe Biden constantly says, I am going to be the best labor president ever. But the problem is there is getting to be widespread union unrest. Look, the Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA, SAG-AFTRA, which I have to disclose, I am a member of SAG-AFTRA and have been for, 30 years, 35 years. You didn't have a choice when you were on TV way back when, and I'm not sure you do now, but AFTRA stands for the American Federation of Radio and Television Artists. So anyway, AFTRA went on strike. Well, no, first the Writers Guild went on strike, then AFTRA went on strike, then UAW went, and then it started to spread. It's clear there's labor unrest, and there's always labor unrest, I think, when you have an economy going down the tubes. Let's remember, I grew up in the 1960s and 70s in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I come from a family of, my grandfather was a steel worker. And when the unions were formed way back in the turn of the 20th century at the Industrial Revolution, they were really needed. I mean, people were being exploited, the working hours, the pay, everything, it was terrible. But then what happened by the time I was growing up, the unions got too heavy-handed. And what happened was the shutdown of the steel industry, essentially. So when I was in high school, let me tell you a quick story. When I was in high school, I worked waitressing at a ice cream parlor. I was making $3 an hour. My girlfriends who had fathers working at the mill, and that either meant United States Steelworkers or Jones and Laughlin or the Homestead plant, there was a million mills back then. They were getting paid $16 an hour to sweep up the floor at the mill. So you see, there became an inequality, and there's always a tension between labor and big business. And I see both sides, but the problem is that tension has to be worked out between the two of them. If it's too one-sided, you lose the business. Mm-hmm. If it's too other-sided, workers are not being treated like human beings. Mm-hmm. So, I think we have to recognize that tension. And the best thing we can do is to keep government out of it. Biden, Trump, everybody, stay out of it. Let business figure it out themselves. The market will figure it out for them. That's a long answer for you. I'm sorry.
I love it. I absolutely love it. But I would like to make a point, though, is that when President Biden was in Michigan at that picket line for 87 seconds, well, overall it was 12 minutes, but he spoke for 87 seconds. He was asked by one of the audience members that does he think that workers should get that 40% pay increase, and he said yes. And then the White House actually had to push back and say, well, he really didn't mean it. But then again, once again they said, oh yeah, well, he did really say that and he did really mean it. So not even the administration knows what the heck it's doing when it comes to this labor strife. President Trump, he spoke at Drake, which is a non-union factory, and that could be really the nail in his coffin of mustering up support for union workers, because these union workers may not really be happy that he's speaking at a non-union facility. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that's true. That's again, stay out of it. But the fact that Biden said something that he shouldn't have, well, is that shocking? I mean, how different is that, right? How different is that his administration and the White House is walking back something that he said? He's not really lunch bucket Joe, let's face it. So I think it'd be good if both of them kind of kept out of it right now, because big business and big labor, and that's what they are, they have to figure it out for themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think government interference is not a good sign. Why don't they pay attention to the economy? Why don't they pay attention to the inflation? Why don't they pay attention to interest rates? When I go to the store and I'm doing the self-checkout and it goes, boop, $5.99, boop, $7.99, boop, $10.99 for bacon. I'm thinking to myself, how are people affording this?
Yeah.
And I think this is what, labor is recognizing, and they've sort of had it.
No, you've been around, as you said, you grew up in Pittsburgh, and you're around all the steel mills and union workers. So if you've been following Shawn Fain, he's the UAW president. He's no fan of Donald Trump, and he actually expressed outrage that he would hold a rally in Detroit because he is the, quote, the billionaire class that unions are fighting. But union workers are the very forgotten men that Trump championed and garnered their support. So I'm wondering, from your vantage point and from people you've been around, is there a disconnect between the union leadership and the workers, at least when it comes to politics?
Between the union workers and the leadership?
Yeah, union leadership are typically Democrats, but of course, a lot of union workers, they supported Trump. So, do the union workers, go toe the line based on what the leadership says?
I don't think so. I think union workers today really have a mind of their own, which is why the UAW hasn't really come out and supported anyone. Yep. Also, you have to remember in 2016, against Hillary Clinton, Trump really had more of the union vote. He lost it in 2020. And, the question is, can he regain it? I think the person who gets the union vote, wins. It's a very powerful vote. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they run in lockstep.
Now, one of the biggest gripes among auto workers is President Biden's push to electric vehicles. So, some of the union workers I've spoken with have acknowledged that the transition to EVs is necessary to compete with China, but at the same time, they're worried they'll lose their jobs just because it requires fewer workers and it actually requires less pay to build some of these EVs. So how can the administration balance this out between advancing the administration's green fetish and acquiescing to union workers' fears? The White House, they released a fact sheet before President Biden went to Michigan, and he said, we're spending billions of dollars to retrain workers. Now, you've been around politics a long time. You've covered politics a long time. Does this work with union workers saying, yeah, we're going to pour billions to retrain you?
No. It didn't work with the coal miners in West Virginia. It didn't work with the steel workers in Pittsburgh. It does not work. Look, this is where the disconnect happens between I will be the most union president of all time, and then he's pushing for EVs, to come in 2035. Look, everybody knows that EVs take 30% less workforce, and a lot of that is going to be shipped over to China. What we do not need is more workers in China and less workers in the United States. And I think if the union people, and I think union people are pretty smart, they can see that this policy with EVs is going to be a mess. Not to mention, just as a side note, the business with electronic trucks EV trucks is really going to be a mess. I mean, first of all, the batteries are so heavy, they're going to eat up and tear up the roadways that Joe Biden is building with his huge, quote, infrastructure plan. Second of all, it's going to affect the supply chain seriously, because now they pull into a stop, they fill up in 15 minutes, they have their burger and fries, they get back on the road, they can go 1,000 miles. With an EV, they have to sit there for a couple hours, and they can go a grand total of 250 miles. This is going to massively slow down the supply chain. There's problems with workers, there's problems with supply chain. This EV stuff has to be very, very gradual. And 2035, I don't think is going to do it. But it's not good for union workers. Let me just be clear.
Trump, he's been on Truth Social, and he's been talking about this since UAW announced its strike. He's making the exact same case you're making, how it's bad for workers. You're going to ship jobs to China. But at the same time, he's been really just bashing Sean Fain and the UAW leadership, and he's telling them, vote for me, endorse me for president. So it's just be fascinating how the UAW is going to work or respond to Trump's, should he be elected.
Well, let's keep in mind now, way back when I was growing up in Pittsburgh in the 60s and 70s, there weren't as many white collar unions. Now we have teachers unions. Now we have, a lot of white collar unions. And where I think the blue collar unions fall and where the white collar unions fall, I think could be very different. Not to mention that, workers, as we talked about, have a mind of their own.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing before I let you go, I want to get your thoughts on, for someone who's who's seeped in politics on a daily basis. Representative Alexandria OcasioCortez she was called out on CBS's Face the Nation over the weekend, and she was asked why she purchased a non-union made Tesla when there were other union made EVs available. Now, her answer was ridiculous. She alluded to something about vaccines and the lack of make and models on the electric side. Now, Teslas have been cited as the most American-made automobiles on the market today. So if you're a politician and you're given this fact, how do you even answer it? Because what's more important today, an all-American automobile or a union-made vehicle with foreign parts and foreign batteries and all those?
Well, again, there we have the tension. Do you care about the employment or do you care about the union employment? And I think basically, I hate to side with Alexandria OcasioCortez, AOC. But I mean, for a while there in the 70s and 80s, politicians didn't dare buy Toyota. They were all Chrysler, Ford. I mean, that's what they felt like they had to drive. So I think there's still some of that. And I actually don't think it matters that much, because one way you're dealing with employment and the other way you're dealing with collective employment, but it's still employment. So, as long as you're looking at where the darn thing is made, I think, that's good enough for politicians. But, but again, what does it matter if AOC buys a car this is trivial. You got to look at the big picture. These people are starving and they're hurting and but at the same time, they can't expect a 32-hour work week for 40 hours worth of, 40 hours of pay for 32 hours of work.
Yes. And the restoration of traditional benefits and cost of living adjustments and a 40% pay increase and inflation protection payments, a Juneteenth holiday. I mean, I've seen all the counter proposals made by these companies, and the Sean Fain and UW are still not satisfied. They call it trash. They say it's unfair. And if you look at some of the numbers, the average employee at Tesla makes about $50, maybe $65 at tops. And if these companies were to acquiesce to all of these demands by UAW, the hourly wage would be around $150 an hour, according to Morgan Stanley estimates. So the competitive advantage that Tesla would have if these companies were to accept these requests would be impressive. I think I wrote about recently for Liberty Nation talking about how Tesla is the chief winner in all of this, whether the UAW gets its demands or not. Because if UAW gets its demands, it's going to be more labor costs for these companies. If the strike is prolonged and the companies don't adhere to what they want, then they're going to lose market share to Tesla. So I think, yes. Yeah,
UAW workers just have to harken back to the steel workers. You grasp for too much and you just might break the back of the pony.
And I think that is a great way to end this interview. So that's fantastic. In the end, I guess we will never know how this will all affect politics in the 2024 election. Will Trump win back the very people he lost in 2020? Or will old Joey Boy from Scranton maintain the Union's stronghold? I'd like to thank Miss Lisa Donner for appearing on the program today. This was her debut appearance, and out of all the people I've interviewed over the years, she truly is the Queen of Queens. Thank you. I'm Andrew Moran, Liberty Nation's economics editor.
Very, very rocky.
Death by government.
Drain the swamp.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are libertynation.com.